your hours can count towards your wife. So let's say you and your wife buy a rental property and you both spend 8 hours this weekend painting it. That's 16 hours that can count on her. Okay. So if you want to make her real estate professional status, you absolutely can, and your hours can count.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor! 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 Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. 𝐒𝐴𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐜.
Where we help physicians use real estate and entrepreneurship to create more freedom, more options, and more control over their lives. One thing that I've learned over time is that building wealth as a physician is rarely a solo journey. Behind many successful physician investors is a spouse, a partner, or a family member who helps evaluate deals, manage operations, make decisions, and carry the vision forward when medicine gets busy. Today, I'm joined by Julie Gates. She's a licensed real estate broker, investor, founder of Sid Was Here Property Management, and the leader behind Team 912 in Savannah, Georgia. Together with her physician husband, Julie has helped build a portfolio of more than 85 doors while creating systems around property management, renovations, furnished rentals, and revenue optimization. Julie, welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor. Non-physician in the room. I'm physician adjacent. I hope that counts.
Absolutely. Well, we're so excited to have you here because all the time I get questions from physicians on how can I get my partner involved? How can I get them motivated about investing in real estate or even just interested in thinking about this journey? So I'm really excited to have you here because you guys have a lot of experience and I think it'll be a really, really great discussion. But before we get into all that, into the portfolio and the operations side as well, can you take us back to the beginning? How did you guys first get started in real estate?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. Don and I met at Loma Linda University, where he went to med school. We actually met in Tennessee briefly, but then both ended up at the same grad school. I got my master's in speech language pathology out there. So I'm still a licensed speech therapist. I do not practice. I have not practiced in a while, but I keep my license active just, I don't know, I guess as a fallback. So Don is a board certified emergency medical doctor, and he was in the ER for several years. It was tough. It's a tough, position. I'm sure we have some ER doctors out there, and I give you all my respect. He did get quite burned out, especially when the kids were little. He would go days without seeing them just because of opposite schedules, and we'd be gone, when he'd wake up and we'd come back and he'd already be gone. It was really tough on a young family. And he just kept saying, I want out, I want out. And Don had a business background. He actually was he wasn't a CPA, I'm sorry, but he was an accountant with Ernst & Young before he went to medical school. And he really wanted to go out on his own. And so literally right after we had our second son, I said, okay, I'll help you. I always told him I'll never be your secretary. And then here, he wanted out of the ER so bad. And I said, I will help you. Let's do it. And he really wanted to get into bariatrics because he had been moonlighting as in bariatrics when he was in residency up in South Carolina. We're now in Savannah, Georgia. And I said, okay, I'm going to help you. I can't with all this complaining. I mean, he was so angry and I hated his schedule. And he was angry when he got home from work and he was in a bad mood on the way to work. You know what I mean? So like he would be off for 16 hours, but the whole time he was just agitated about what he was about to go in and deal with. And so I jumped in with feet first and we opened a practice here in Savannah. And within a few years, we had expanded it to 6 locations. And I had read Dave Ramsey's book when I was in college and I was very debt averse and I did not want to pay rent. And so I said, okay, we're not going to pay rent. We're going to just buy our locations. And that was like one of the best things we did was buy our practice locations. And I want to encourage you guys, like, if you don't own your location, work on that. Like it's completely doable. You're either going to pay your rent or someone else's. So I really encourage you to pay your own, mortgage. So we started buying locations. And I have to say, as a doctor's wife, okay, I'm here to speak as that. Like I got lost in the mix. I was working hard. I was also dealing with the kids. I was running them to school, running my tail off while they're at school, coming home, cooking, homework, and then back to work. And then, Don, at the time, he was working 2 jobs. So he would work all night in the ER. He would see patients all day in our new clinics. And he finally got to where he could get out But I kind of, after several years of everyone thinking that he was this rock star and I was at the mall all day, I was kind of ready for my own thing. And so one day he came home from seeing patients. He was out of the ER at that point. And he said, Julie, I met this patient and she was a retired teacher and she just spent 3 months in Europe. And I was like, really? I mean, that is not free. And he said, I asked her, how did you do it? And she said, oh, well, we have 200 rental properties and they're all paid off and we just travel wherever we want. And he goes, Julie, that's the answer. If we can get 200 properties, we can retire. And for some reason, it was like an ultimate truth to me. Like, again, we had been kind of buying commercial real estate every couple of years. And I said, okay, like I was kind of ready. Like I was kind of ready to move out of my office manager position at that point. And I just kind of jumped in feet first, and now I love it.
That is awesome. Well, what a cool patient encounter. And I think that probably leads to, you know, when he was in the ER, he probably didn't have much time as he's seeing all these patients to like build that relationship. And imagine, you know, like what if that patient never came into that bariatric clinic, didn't have the time to talk with her and learn about the fact that she's got these 200 rentals and travels all over Europe. That sounds amazing. And so what a cool way to think about that. And a reminder for all of us out there that like our patients have great stories too. And if we have some time to listen to them, like that can completely impact and change your life as well. Julie, you mentioned the kind of secretary statement, right? And like the difficulties that your husband was having and kind of finding your own identity in that, like, hey, how can I build something as well alongside your husband and with the mutual goal of how can we become more financially free or less dependent on medicine? What were some things initially that you kind of struggled with from maybe an identity perspective, as you mentioned, or anything that was difficult for you as a spouse to like flip that mindset to like, let's go build this and build this together, and I'm fired up about it?
Well, I'm going to take you way back, actually. I'm actually the granddaughter of a physician. My grandfather was a family practitioner, but he did, he was delivering babies. I'm sure he did several minor surgeries, things like that. And I remember as a child how poorly his practice was managed. And he was a physician back in the heyday of medicine when they actually got paid really well. And at some point, my grandparents found out that the office manager hadn't billed Medicare for like 7 years. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the wasted money. And I remember that really bothering me as a child, although I wasn't, old enough to do anything. I was like in high school at that point when that happened. So that's really was for me personally, that was a big motivator to get involved in Dawn's practice because I had always watched that with my grandparents and I knew how much wealth had been wasted. And that really bothered me. So I have to say I was very motivated in that no one cares about your money like you do and your wife. Like it's her money too. And I can't emphasize that enough. Like if the wife is ignoring the money and the husband doesn't have time to deal with it, it's going to go somewhere and it's probably not going to go in your pocket. So that was part of my original motivation. But like you said, back to once we were rolling and we had this large practice and Dawn was doing really well, everyone, I was like this fly on the wall that no one really thought about, even though I was really doing a lot in the background and my husband was great. He knew how much I was doing. But, at one point in real estate, I put together the biggest deal of my career at that point, and I had spent months on it with this banker, lined everything up, and he had to come to Don's office to get the paperwork signed. And because, he's so busy and he's like, oh, I'll just come down. And so Don walks in with his pen. Okay. That's the amount of work he had done on this deal. And he sat down and asked Dawn, how do I invest in real estate? How are you doing it? And just, like I'm an idiot in the corner. And I got so upset over that. But I really realized that it's been great to have my own identity, and you can't attribute all of it just to him. I'm the face of everything. I'm running a property management company and now a brokerage. But it's been really great to have my own thing. But it's really been us building together as a family. Our kids have been involved. And I've really fallen in love with real estate. And it didn't start that way. Okay. It just started with hey, do you want to go to Europe for 3 months? Yes, I really do. And let's work out a way to do it. You never know where these things are going to go when you first start.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think, a lot of us need to spend some time to navigate and figure out, okay, where are we headed next? And then put fuel in the fire and accelerate. And that's when you really put in the work and the time. But if you don't figure out where you're headed or where you want to head, there's no point in accelerating because you're not going to get where you want to go. And so I think that's really important. I would love to go to Europe for 3 months too. That's actually in the time horizon for us in the next couple of years. we think Europe, but we're going to do some world school with the kids and do three months abroad. And not sure where yet, but more to come. But yeah, I think everyone should have that goal in mind, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, this big, huge, crazy goal. It may be as simple as like, I want to create enough income through real estate that I don't have to moonlight anymore, or I can work one less shift. Like just build it up and go from there. Because it all takes getting started and getting started with your first deal. What did your guys' first deal look like?
I lost money. When I finally, just to be honest with you, this was long before podcasts existed. I did read a couple of books, but I tell people all the time, like, just don't go too big, and you're probably going to lose money in your first deal, or it's going to be thin unless you have really good guidance, and that's important as well. But yeah, once I flipped into residential, which is a lot easier to get into, may I see. Commercial, it is expensive. Okay, coming up with those down payments was really tough. So once I flipped to residential, I said, oh, this is so cheap. I can get into a house for $20,000 or maybe $30,000. So I was constantly saving up. But when the first one I ever bought, it was in a great market. I have to say, I chose something near my home, and we live in like one of the best school districts in Savannah. And so I literally looked up how much would the loan payment be, and then how there was a tenant inside paying rent. So I knew how much rent was. And I said, oh, that'll cover my loan payment. I'll just get a property manager and I'll make all this money. I was losing maybe $120 a month, but I learned a ton, and it's okay, right? I had zero vacancy. No one died. That property I still own to this day. It does pull in over $1,000 over the mortgage, so real estate works really well over time. And I learned that as well, which is, hey, guess what? You can raise the rent next year and then you'll cash flow and you're going to be okay. Like it was fine. But yep, I just started buying long-term rentals in a great market, and I kind of figured it out. You also tend to lose money the first couple with contractors, again, if you don't know what you're doing, and I definitely didn't. And sometimes I hired the wrong ones and sometimes I hired the right ones. But, we were constantly struggling to come up with that down payment. And what we learned was that if we did the work as a team with our family, we actually saved a ton. So we would take down a property and then we would paint it ourselves. My husband and the kids would get on YouTube and just figure out, how do you change plugs? How do you rewire, a light switch, different things like that. Like we just kind of figured it out. And I have to say the kids absolutely were not on board at first. It was a forced labor situation. We would let them have like Saturday with their friends. They'd have baseball or whatever. And then the next day it would be like, we called it all hands on deck. And all four of us would go to a property, spend 6 to 8 hours there working. And honestly, we saved a fortune and we all learned a ton. And now looking back at our large portfolio, a lot of it is because of, our family getting in there and doing it ourselves. And I'm just really proud of that. Both our kids now thank us. They did not, 15 years ago, thank us for any of it, but they have really great skills. And it's because we got into real estate, and I'm looking forward to passing it on to them someday.
That is so cool. What a great way to get the whole family involved and bring them together and to learn those skills. I always think about, okay, like how can I model to my kids? They're, younger, they're 5.5 and 2, and they just paint the walls with their own marker and colored pencils and crayons. But how can I get them involved in the business to not only like understand like, hey, this is real estate, but to understand like, how can I be an entrepreneur? How can I work through these different problems? How can I learn what it actually takes to like be a business owner and get them involved in the business in some capacity? And so I love hearing those stories, and what a cool skill builder for them going forward. So I'm glad that they're thankful for it now. That is awesome. So got started with traditional residential rentals, long-term rentals. What did that process look like for you as you were growing and scaling? You mentioned the down payments were getting a little bit more difficult. I'm sure financing probably started to get a bit more difficult as you guys scaled. Yes. What were some things you learned along that journey initially getting started?
Well, along the way, by 2017, I was moving pretty well, but again, kept running out of money. And that's when I found short-term rentals. And that was really before Airbnb was a known thing. It was before it was a verb. And we actually have a pool house on our property, and it was already furnished. And so I started renting that out, and it made it so much easier to come up with the down payments. And again, I had an asset that I didn't have to buy, and it was already furnished. I was very lucky. And once I found short-term rentals, that launched me into the stratosphere. And so I started seeing a need there for short-term rentals and medium-term rentals. And so I started kind of moving into the furnished rental direction. And it was cool because that really made me less scared to talk to tenants. When I first got into real estate, I was like, oh, I will never manage a property. I'm never going to plunge a toilet. I said all of the little things that you hear all the time. But once I managed a few short-term rentals on my own, I was like, these are nice people. They just really want you to come fix their door handle. It's really not rocket scientist, not that hard. And I got kind of frustrated with my property manager as well because some of the repairs I thought were excessive. And at the time, it was kind of cool. Again, back to my kids. My younger son had a squirrel rescue at that point. He was really doing some cool stuff with baby squirrels. He just loved animals and people would find them and bring them over. Well, the first squirrel he ever rescued, her name was Sid. And I would see squirrels everywhere. Once I was tuned into squirrels like I would see them everywhere. And so I started saying, well, Sid was here, that's so funny. And I would have the squirrels with me all the time in my purse because when my kid was at school, I would carry squirrels. So I actually started a property management business at that point for our own portfolio. It had gotten big enough to where I was looking at what I was paying the property manager on my long-term rentals, and I was personally handling the short-term rentals. I said, this is crazy. I can do this. So that's when I started Sid Was Here, was in 2017. And so it was just for my own portfolio. But I absolutely enjoyed it. And I was loving real estate so much. And I met this couple at the closing table. I bought a property from them and they said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, oh, I'm going to make it a short-term rental. And they ended up later selling me more, financing more to me. And they asked me to manage their portfolio. And then they told all their friends. And I became a fairly decent sized property manager here in Savannah. And then as a property manager, I started seeing people buying the wrong product and trying to make money on it and failing because the agent didn't have a clue about the laws. So I later became an agent and a broker. And I now really only focus on investors. And it's really cool because you just don't see a lot of agents that have a large portfolio like I do. And I really understand the asset class. And so it's been so cool where I just watching for myself, just moving from wanting financial freedom into really being able to help others. And so that's kind of my focus now. I'm really trying not to buy any more properties. I have my enough number, although I do keep buying them if they're home runs. But I really, really enjoy investment real estate. Like I have completely fallen in love with the entire asset class.
That is awesome. Yeah, you have such a unique perspective with investment experience, with the operator experience, with a physician spouse experience, like so many things to lean on that can be so beneficial for folks who are just getting started. They're looking to find a good realtor. They're looking to work with a good broker. Like what a great person to work with because you have that background. And I know right now you largely work with physicians as well and work with a large number of them. And that's fantastic. I wanted to ask a question though. You mentioned getting started in the property management as things were scaling. Was there ever a point in time where like systems were really difficult or you felt overwhelmed with the aspect of managing them? Or another question I would ask would be, if for the physician's spouse who's listening to this, would you recommend they do the property management when they're getting started?
No, honestly, what I would say, because honestly, had Don said, Julie, let's buy real estate and you manage it, I would have been like, hell to the no. So I would recommend getting a property manager, to be honest with you. You can always, I would say more an advanced practice level there, because a professional should and can and will pay for themselves. Okay. They should be able to get a tenant in more quickly. They should have a lot of efficiencies of scale. And also the technology is expensive to manage. So I'm never going to tell you I did it the right way. I tend to do things the hard way and then kind of automate myself out of that. And I did that. Speaking of systems, I have been through so many different types of software. It's unbelievable. But now with AI, it's just getting better and better. So I would say if your wife or spouse has never done anything with real estate, I would definitely not encourage them to manage. I would say, look, we're going to find you a really great property manager. If you can just help me buy it and take it down and then you pass it off to someone qualified, like that's totally fine. That's how I started. And that was my comfort level, was the deal acquisition. And then I wanted to pass it off. And then later I was able to step back in and manage.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. You can always step back in, but
right.
Having, learning so much, getting started, buying your first deal and operating on top of that could be a little bit tricky. I mean, maybe a little easier if you're doing a long-term rental, but still it's hard to find tenants sometimes and vet them appropriately. Yeah. And what happens if you get a maintenance call and all those sorts of things. So I think that's really great advice. So you guys went, long-term rentals, single family, and then more short-term rentals and furnished rentals and midterm. Is that where you're still focused on at this point, or what you've been focused on these latest deals, or what's that look like as that portfolio has evolved over time for you?
That's a really great question. I have to tell you, I'm like really eyeball to eyeball with the real estate market. And so I typically see trends coming and going ahead of time, which is great. And I want to tell you one thing, Alex, my husband is also always talking to patients all day long. So he hears a lot that's coming and I hear a lot that's coming. And so I have purposely tried to very much pivot my portfolio. And I don't care what your asset class is. It could be stocks, it can be crypto, it can be, oil futures, like it doesn't matter. But you're going to see things go up and you're going to see things go down. It does not matter what the asset class is. And real estate is the same. So back in 2017, when I was renting my pool house, I kept having people go, hey, I'm a travel nurse. Can I rent it for 90 days? Hey, I'm here for work. Can I rent it for 2 months or 3 months? And I flat out would say, no, I don't want you in my backyard for 2 months. Like I kind of like that the guests left on Monday, but I also, again, am tuned into the trends. I said, there's a need here. And I pivoted into medium-term rentals very hard. I made a ton of money doing it. I actually wrote part of the book for that, for Bigger Pockets. I have 2 of the chapters in the 30-day stay. But I actually pivoted out of medium-term rentals 3 years ago. I've now taken 12 of mine and made them into long-term rentals ahead of the curve, because once COVID hit, guess who had a bunch of medium-term rentals? Me. I owned a ton. I was managing a ton. COVID hit. We did great. And I was thrilled. But guess what? As the bubble was going up, the curve was headed north, everybody got in, and then it got oversaturated, and now it's on a massive down curve. So I was luckily able to get out ahead of it. And I started telling clients, they'd call me, I want to buy a medium-term rental. And I started saying, no, you don't. Okay. I want their long-term business. And so I was kind of pivoting my clients into long-term rentals. So nowadays the play, and again, this will change, but right now it's 2026. The play now is taxes. Okay. Short-term rentals are the sweet thing again. Short-term rentals went up, they went down, they're headed back up again because of the tax advantages. And so that's a big thing that I'm working on. But again, keep in mind, it's going to change. And that's why you want to buy a property with multiple exit strategies. The medium-term rentals that I bought, I made sure they would cash flow as a long-term rental before I bought them, because they were not licensed. They were not, anything. I knew I couldn't run them as a short-term rental. So I said, well, I'm going to furnish it. I'm going to do well. And then if I get sick of it, I can pull the furniture out and make it a long-term rental. And that's exactly what I have done for every single one of my medium-term rentals at this point. So just be aware that you will have to kind of pay attention, unless you're in like a beach market or, here in Savannah, we have a great short-term rental market, but it's very regulated. You have to buy it with a license attached, things like that.
Yeah, I want to foot stomp that, because a lot of times I hear doctors say, I want to buy a short-term rental just for the tax benefits. Mm-hmm. And they don't think about the other implications of, okay, what does it take to run and operate a short-term rental? How do you actually make money as a short-term rental? Is this a good deal as a short-term rental? So they end up buying a property just for the tax benefits. And they don't understand, hey, some of those tax benefits will be recaptured when you sell, unless you do a 1031 exchange. And they buy a fundamentally poor deal just because they want the tax benefits. So let's talk about that a little bit more, because taxes are certainly something that physicians need to really pay attention to if they're not already, because so much of our money gets eaten up in taxes. What are some tax benefits that you've learned about in real estate that's been really beneficial for you?
Well, first and foremost, the depreciation is fantastic. Like the more rentals you have, the more depreciation you have, and that is going to save on taxes. And I know everyone's talked about this a million times, but you work, 3 to 4 months a year just for the government. Well, if you can take that money that you're going to pay the government and put that into a cash flowing piece of real estate, why wouldn't you do that? Your guest or tenant is going to pay off the rest of the mortgage for you. Okay. You cannot beat that concept. If you want to buy $1 million worth of Google stock, you have to come up with $1 million. You do. Mm-hmm. But if you want to buy $1 million property, you can arguably only come up with 10% of that, which is probably what you would pay in taxes in 1 year, right? And so you just shift that money over here. Now you have a property that you and your family can enjoy. It's going to grow in value over time. It's going to put cash in your pocket every month, hopefully. And it's also going to provide you great tax advantages. So when you really understand what a great asset class it is, there's just so many great, things. And it was interesting. I do a lot with finance. I really love finance. And I was at a crypto conference in January with a friend of mine who's really into crypto. And I went just to be supportive. And I kept saying, don't talk to me about crypto. I'm really not that versed in it. I understand the concept, but I was saying, don't talk to me. I'm not in crypto. I'm in real estate. Every guy down there, including the guy leading it, was like, wait, what? I have a portfolio. I had several of them pull out their spreadsheets and they wanted me to look at them. And so what you realize is that real estate really is the best wealth builder. And most people that have wealth have a good bit of real estate, but maybe they're only talking about their stocks or their bonds or their crypto. But when you really talk to them about what they actually have in their portfolio, a lot of it is anchored on real estate. That is not on accident. These people are very intelligent, and you can literally anyone can get into investment real estate. Okay. It's really not even that complicated. It's really 7th grade math.
Yeah, it's way less complicated than becoming a doctor and going to residency and practicing medicine. Yeah, you're exactly right. There's so many benefits to it, taxes being one of them, that is massive. Do you mind talking a little bit more about like real estate professional status, what that looks like? Who does that make sense for folks who are thinking about their tax burden that they're going to try and take down? Or who does it make more sense maybe to go down the short-term rental route and the short-term rental loophole?
Great question. Again, we're talking physician spouses here. So as a physician, you're very unlikely to qualify for reps, for real estate professional status, because you would have to spend more time doing real estate than medicine. And that's not true for most doctors, at least for my husband. That is absolutely not true. But if you can get your wife to, your hours can count towards your wife. So let's say you and your wife buy a rental property and you both spend 8 hours this weekend painting it. That's 16 hours that can count on her. Okay. So if you want to make her real estate professional status, you absolutely can, and your hours can count. I don't know about the kids. I don't think kids' hours count. But anyway, that's one option. Although there are many times I've talked to docs and their wife just is not interested enough. They don't want to do, I don't want to do 750 hours. That's okay, because the big, beautiful bill has really stepped in from 2025. And that's where short-term rentals, commercial real estate, I'm blanking on warehousing, industrial. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of industrial and short-term rentals step in, because you can use other asset classes and do the rapid depreciation, and you can get the same, outcome in that you get a massive tax deduction, and your wife actually doesn't have to have rep status if you buy the right asset class and then do a cost segregation study on it. I have clients, they will buy one every single year. Their tax money becomes the down payment. We manage it. The tenant pays it off for them, and they just buy a different one every year with their tax money. And they're growing a portfolio, and every year they're getting more and more pay down. And, they're really building a way out. It's just really exciting to watch. And at Sid Was Here, because I'm so dialed in on this, we're able to help them. You're able to manage a property manager with your, the big, beautiful bill. So, and a great instance of that is if I had a pharmacist recently, he bought one through me. He and his wife came down. They actually helped us. That's not typical, but they spent 3 or 4 days helping us get it put back together. They are managing it themselves. They qualify, but in the background, they're also managing us. We're managing the cleaning team, some of the other things that come up with short-term rentals. Like, we work with them to qualify for this tax credit. And it's just really exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the pharmacist and his wife. What did that deal look like for them? Any numbers that you're able to share in regards to that?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I love is that, I shouldn't say I love it, but as I said, short-term rentals went up after COVID. They really peaked. And then now they're on the way down for sure, because we got oversaturated. This is nationwide. I'm not talking Savannah. I'm talking nationwide. The asset class went up. Now it's coming down. But the great thing about it is that it's created a huge buying opportunity. I just bought 2 more short-term rentals, and I wasn't even planning to, but it was such a stupid good deal, and the guy was going to finance it to me. It's basically a free property because the guests are paying it off for me. Like, I'm not even paying the bill, and this is the same concept for this pharmacist. He and his wife, they live in New York State, very high taxes. They have high state taxes. They have high everything, really, quite frankly. And so they wanted a short-term rental in Savannah because they like to come here themselves. Okay. Now, if you buy a short-term rental over 2 hours from your home, it can count as a second home. banks love second homes. They see them as more valuable to you than an investment property, which I disagree. I would keep an investment property before I would keep a second home. But of course, I don't have a second home. So they wanted to come to Savannah. And again, you can do a 10% down loan if you're buying a second home, if it's over 2 hours away. And that's what they did. But because things have kind of popped here in Savannah and elsewhere, there's so many people that just went out. Okay, they're tired. They bought at the top. They're now selling at the bottom. It happens all the time. And I'm sure you've talked about this on your show. And again, it doesn't matter what asset class, but the rich often feed off of the people of the poor who get in trouble. They just went out, they'll sell for anything. There are opportunities, okay? And you are actually helping them out when you take these properties off of their hands. And so here in Savannah, we know as a property manager, I've been here forever, we know what amenities book and what amenities do not. We know where the best locations are. And that's where the advantage is working with an agent that's also a property manager. I'm going, hey, this is what people want. If you can put it in front of them, they'll rent it, and they'll rent it at a higher dollar amount than the other places. So this house, I took this pharmacist and his wife in. It was so funny. They walked in and they were like, yeah. And they literally tried to walk back out. And I was like, no, hang on. And I mean, you're talking ugly, horrible grandma's attic decor. I wouldn't have stayed there either. Okay. And last year, this home, it's a 4-bedroom home in Savannah with parking, which is impossible to find in the historic district. These homes were built before cars, okay? And so it had parking, which is a huge amenity, and it had room for other amenities because it had a yard, which is also unheard of. I said, wait, come back. The decor is temporary, okay? The cheapest thing you can change on a house is the decor. It did not need a rehab. It was just really ugly as far as decor. And I said, just go with me on this. And they still left. They said no. And then we looked at a bunch of other properties. So the pharmacist, I finally got him to lowball him, and he did. And we just kept back and forth. And finally, like, I'm going to say late November, he was like, I have to buy something. I don't want to pay taxes. And we came back to this property. And by then the seller was just so sick of it. She had no renters. She had no buyers, nothing. So I was able to get him this property. It was like a $930,000 property. He was able to close on it for $670,000. Okay. Really great deal. And it didn't need a rehab.
That's
it made
awesome.
$23,000. Yeah, truth. It made $23,000 in 2025. And I said, look, we'll decorate it for you. We'll do everything. That's what we do. We're full service. So he had to have a budget. You have to have some cash aside if you're buying a short-term rental. We redecorated it. We did not launch the property until March 1. It took us 2 months to get that thing ready. He closed, I think, December 29 or something to qualify. And so we redecorated it, and it's now tracking to pull in $120,000 this year.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. Just decor. We did paint and all new furniture. And obviously there was a decor scheme. We used a professional decorator. This is not something I just called in Wayfair for. But that is what purposeful management is all about, is like, as an investor, I want you to make money. I want this guy to buy another one. That's how I get paid. We want him to be successful. The last thing in the world I want is for him to be unsuccessful. If he keeps buying every year and lets me manage them, I win too, right? So we're on the same exact team, but it really does work. And he's going to come down later in August, I think, and enjoy the home with his kids and go back, which you're allowed to do for 2 weeks a year. And it's just been really exciting. I have so many clients like that. They've really been, able to buy cash flowing real estate and also get the tax advantages.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, next time I'll buy that. So feel free to reach out. And
I have a list of them right now.
There you go. Yeah, that is awesome. Well, I wanted to hit, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about markets and what that looks like, especially for out-of-state investors. Say, we'll just use Savannah for example. Obviously, you know that really well. But what demand drivers do you think make Savannah an attractive market, or what should folks be looking for when they're looking to invest specifically out of state?
Okay, start with the asset class. Okay, so let's talk about industrial, for example. I'm gonna keep throwing Savannah out there, but we do a lot of industrial here, and that's also in the big beautiful bill. So let's say you want to do a warehouse, or I'm obsessed with cold storage. I really want to own cold storage. Well, am I going to get that in Macon, Georgia? No, that's inland. So Savannah has a giant port. It just depends on what you're wanting. If you want to do a short-term rental, you want to look for a market where they're not oversaturated, but do they have a strong tourist drive? Like Nashville's a great one. Okay. Is Nashville going to have no tourists next year? Very unlikely, right? Just like Orlando is another great example. Orlando's a great tourism market. Tourism isn't going anywhere. So you want to kind of figure out, A, what asset class do you want to buy? And then second, what market, okay? And then once you kind of narrow it down, you want to do your research. Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is it oversaturated? Is it undersaturated? Pretty much with short-term rentals, you're going to hear about oversaturation, but there's always a way around that. You know, like in Savannah, for example, we do have people getting out, but when I have buyers, I draw a box on the MLS like this. I'm like, you only want to be in this box because this is where people want to rent. People want to walk in Savannah. So if you can be within a mile of River Street, that's going to be a short-term rental that's going to rent for the most money and stay rented, and it's going to have the highest occupancy. Okay, so that's where working with someone that understands the market really well is going to do that. It's like Gatlinburg. Okay, I'm not a pro at Gatlinburg. I've been there many times, but there are parts of Gatlinburg that are extremely desirable, and I have no doubt that there are other parts that, you know, it's going to take you an hour because of traffic to get anywhere. Well, I wouldn't want to buy there. Okay, I hate the traffic in Sevierville. So, you know, that's where it's important to really do your research and just figure out the asset class and then the location, and then you look for opportunity. Okay. If I see a house that's been sitting 60, 90, 120 days, I'm going to go hard for that sales price. Never pay asking price. If you see a property that just hit last week, it is very unlikely that you're going to be able to get a discount. But if you can find a property with issues, that's really great. Okay. I love walking in, finding an issue and being like, oh no, we're so scared. Oh no, we're going to need a discount for this. I'm not scared. I was in a property Friday and it had poison oak growing through the living room floor. Okay. I'm going to get a killer deal on that for my buyer. And that's more of a flip. Okay. That's not a short-term rental, but I'm just saying, like, don't be scared of scary things. So things that scare off other buyers, that's exactly what you want to run after. If there's some foundation issues, maybe it needs a new roof, you know, things that sound just horrible and scary to other people, like, if you have some money set aside, you can get across any of that. A new roof is a great example. I've been in multiple properties with giant holes in the roof. I love a new roof. They do 50-year roofs now, you know, so I love putting a new roof on. I know I will never replace that in my lifetime. I have no issue with that. But am I going to use that hole in the roof to get a killer discount? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. You know, so you got to pretend to be scared. I use my blonde hair a lot. Like, oh no, we're really scared about that. We're going to need some money back. They do it. They just want to sell, especially if it's been for sale for a long time. So there are so many things that you can use to your advantage. And, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of times the seller just needs out and they'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, that is great advice. Yeah, another one is like one that smells like smoke. It smells like money. I just go in and you get that cleaned up and deep clean and ozone it, and it smells great. You would never know. So there's a lot of great opportunities. Or a hoarder house, like, hey, that's not the end of the world either, as long as structurally it's good. And so lots of good opportunity and value add from that perspective. Well, as we're getting closer to wrapping things up, what would you say to the physician spouse who's listening to this, who's thinking, this sounds appealing, I just need to know what the next step is? What would you say to them?
I think the next step is to commit and start learning and figure out a market. And when I started, you know, I was just going to invest here in Savannah because that's where I live. And that's probably the best place for y'all as well. You know, like whatever worked for you guys, but what I did was I picked 3 zip codes and I went on to Zillow. And again, I was very unsophisticated. Okay. I went on to Zillow and I said, hey, show me everything on Zillow under $200,000. That's what I did. This is 15 years ago. And so every time a property hit or changed price in my price range and in my 3 zip codes, I knew about it. And I would look at the price per square foot. I looked at the photos, and then I would try to figure out the rent. It's gotten a lot easier to calculate rent, the long-term rents, because like Zillow has a great rental lookup. I use it. I don't use it very often, but I know a lot of the agents on my team, they use the Zillow rental manager. So it's actually gotten so much easier to have data. You could actually even use AI. You could go into ｃhatGPT and say, hey, what rent would I get for this house on Whistler Avenue or whatever? So I would start there. I would pick your market and then what asset class do you want? And then I would pick some zip codes and just really study those. The more educated you get, the more confident you're going to have. Okay. And real estate it's really interesting. It can be a lot of fun. And especially if you're trying to get your wife excited, let me tell you, one way to get them excited is to tell them you want to buy a short-term rental in an area that they love to go visit. Okay. we love this stuff. I'm a chick. I can't help it. I love to go on vacation. I love to decorate. I love to have fun. That will right there will get them excited. Maybe you guys like to go to Niagara Falls. Okay, get excited. Like, let's buy a place near Niagara Falls. We'll decorate it. You can help me manage it. We'll get a property manager, but you can manage them, whatever. Like, that's a great way to get your spouse involved, is to say, hey, what's something that you're interested in that will also build us wealth? And I guarantee you it will work if you can get them to get on board.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's kind of what I did too. We had some short-term rentals, and my wife is an incredible designer. She's a photographer. Yeah. She loves like the design aspect. And so, yeah, she loved the opportunity to be able to take these ugly properties and design them, or take this space and figure out how to make it awesome for a short-term rental. And I love it. We were just talking about the other day how we kind of miss that working together, like the assisted living side of our business. She's grateful that we're helping provide great care for seniors, but other than that, she doesn't care, but she does miss the, working together. I remember we put Jack, our oldest now, he was in one of those like little bumbo chairs when he was 6 months old, fat little chubby thighs, watching us paint cabinets at one of the short-term rentals. I'm like, man, at the time you're like, this kind of sucks. And you look back on it, you're like, I would gladly go back and be painting cabinets with 6-month-old Jack and my wife. Ended up being a really fun time. And so being able to build together, to grow together, to support each other is massive. And then it ultimately leads to potentially taking that 3 months in Europe, or taking a step back. And so I wanted to ask before we wrap things up, what's the end goal look like for you guys, or what's next for you guys in terms of potentially transitioning out of medicine or decreasing medicine, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm very excited about the future. And that, in fact, that's all that Don and I talk about. I actually plan to keep Sid Was Here going. I'm going to cut back a little bit, but I really love, my property management company has kind of become my family office. It does manage a lot of our assets. And so I do plan to keep that. We would love to get Don out of medicine, because I am able to travel and continue to work and he's not. And so we would like to have more location independence. This is completely a different topic for another day, but I've always been a huge travel hacker. Ever since college, when we had no money, I was points hacking. And so I've added a travel agent license to my thing, and I do a lot with points hacking, because as a property manager and a real estate investor, I'm spending money constantly. I might as well get points for it. And your expenses are assets as well. So I'm just really, obsessed with assets and liabilities, and I really enjoy it. So I am planning to stay into real estate, at least part-time, for a very long time, mostly because it's, managing our assets. But I really enjoy it. But, we are able to travel now a good bit, and my rentals are still kicking out money. I have a great property manager. It happens to be one that I own, but I'm also taking advantage of that I know that there are people watching over what I have while I'm gone, and I'm able to come and go from Savannah as much as I want. And real estate is just really powerful. The other thing I have to say, and I really encourage you to embrace this, is, and you kind of mentioned it yourself, Alex, like you end up seeing some crazy stuff and doing some crazy things with your kids in tow, and you make these really great stories. And as a family, we just love to, like you said, look back and laugh about, we have seen some crazy stuff in real estate, and you just end up being the funniest person at the party, because you'll be like, oh, well, you won't believe what I did today, And so you have to, I always say in this business, you're either going to laugh or you're going to cry. And I really try hard to laugh about things, because it's a trip. Like I don't know, it's just really exciting. Like no day is ever the same. It's really great.
I love that. Well, here's to a lot more laughing. How can folks reach out to you, Julie, if they want to work with you, if they want to learn more about your story or connect with you?
Well, I want you to know, Alex, I made a video just for this. And I love, if you can save money, that's actually money in your pocket, which I always, as an agent, as a property manager, as an investor, I want my buyer to save as much as possible. So I actually made a video just for this podcast, and it's about how to get the lowest APR possible. I can actually help you save up to 1.5 points off of your APR. So I did a very quick, I think it's 5 or 6 minutes. It's a YouTube video. So Team 912, that is my real estate team. So if you'll go to team912.com/podcast, I'm going to have a link to the video there. And I really encourage you to watch it, and just keep in mind, that don't pay full price. Try to get a discount on everything, insurance, APR, all the things. I'm going to talk about it in the video, but I really hope it'll be of service to you. And I want you to know, me and my husband, we've been where you are. We've really kept wishing we had a way out, wanting to know. Now we know what our way out is. We aren't there yet, but we're working towards it every day as a couple, as a family. And it's just been really powerful to do together. I have to say that's been my favorite part, is just, Don and I were on the same team. We're pulling in the same direction. We've seen a lot of other couples, kind of grow apart. We're like neck and neck all weekend working on stuff. Like there's no way he's getting away. So real estate has really brought our family together, and I would say kept us together, because we just have so much going on at the same time that we're all involved in. Very proud of that. Both kids are still involved in the businesses, even though that one's in college, one's out of college. My oldest one bought his first rental property at 22 years old. I'm so proud of that. My little one came home from college and he's doing volunteer work. He's trying to get into medical school, so he has to get his hours. But he asked me if he could be my handyman on the side. He's like, Mom, I miss working at Sid Was Here. Can I come in? I said, are you kidding me? I always need a reliable handyman. And I can't even tell you, I was so honored that he was actually choosing to go help me in the properties after I strong-armed him for years. That just said it all to me, that he really gets what we're doing here and he's a part of it, and he's really proud to be a part of it. And I always say, my name, the company name, Sid Was Here, that's an ode to how much I love my kids and how proud I am of them, for taking care of the squirrels. And it's just really been a great way to grow together as a family.
Wow, that's a perfect way for us to wrap this up. Well, I'll encourage folks to check the YouTube link. We'll put it in the show notes. Click that, watch the video, reach out to Julie if she can be of any benefit for you, because you've certainly added so much value today, Julie. Hopefully we have a lot more motivated physicians and physicians' spouses and partners after this episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I'm Dr. Alex 𝐒𝐤𝐦 and Julie Gates with another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.